Well, good late morning on the cusp of 12 noon and early afternoon. So, hope things, again, as always, are good for you in terms of just what's going on in your soul and all the things that God provides. Because that is always the priority in our lives, not so much what's going on in our circumstances, but how we're perceiving those things, how we're internalizing those things, how we're responding and reacting to those things, and to see what these Beatitudes give us that we've been going through that kind of just at least orients us to what God desires of us. And behind everything that God desires of us, what He commands is His provision, is the ability to do the very things. God never intended for our Christian lives to be lived by our own resources, but by His. And as we are in His Word, in His Spirit, in prayer, in fellowship, in worshiping Him, that's where the life of God is going to flow through us. So it says here, in terms of what Jesus instructs, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. And where we are today, blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. And then blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. And that's where we find ourselves today. It's kind of fortuitous that we're in this passage, in this daily video, and then on Sunday in Romans 12:18, one of the significant verses that exists in terms of just us being peacemakers and how we pursue that. And the conditional aspect of what is there in Romans 12:18. So I was kind of torn. It's kind of difficult, knowing, okay, what do I share on Sunday morning? What do I share on Tuesday? And how in depth do I get? Particularly, I was running out of time on Sunday. But anyways, give a little bit of both in both venues. But really, when you think about, peacemaking, I mean, would you agree that the greatest barrier to peacemaking is our need to advance our opinion and press our rights? To advance our opinion and to press our rights. I mean, not that that's a wrong thing to want our opinions to be known, particularly when we're representing the truth of God, when we're trying to defend that, that's a very, important thing. Again, we're not wrong to do that, but maybe how we do it, to the extent that we allow it to destroy peace. I think in some contexts that's appropriate, maybe in other contexts it isn't, and that's where the discernment of the Spirit and just following the will and plan of God comes in. But oftentimes when we think about pressing our opinion and pressing our rights, it's probably more selfish-oriented. And yet that's oftentimes where the conflict comes in. That's where where the barrier to peacemaking comes in. And basically, again, if we're going to be peacemakers, we need to work through conflict. Again, it's going to be in the presence of confrontation where this peacemaking is going to be most substantive. When you have peacemaking with those people that you agree with, that's not really peacemaking. That's just familiarity. That's just a agreement. Whereas peacemaking is, in the presence of conflict. When you recognize we are different people, we have different needs, we have different perceptions, we have different backgrounds, different, orientations, different like intelligence. All the things that are different about us, that naturally is going to mean conflict. That's going to mean that we're going to approach things differently. And that's why this peacemaking is so powerful. But when you think about pressing your rights, when you think about pressing your opinions, and then you're with someone else who's trying to do the same thing, again, that's where the rubber meets the road in terms of this peacemaking. Well, now just imagine, again, in God's economy, that God takes care of all your needs and is the one who defines all truth. I mean, does that change the dynamic of that engagement where, again, you're pressing your opinion, you're pressing your rights, someone else is pressing their opinion, they're pressing their rights? Well, again, realize that God, directs. He's the ultimate source of truth. He's the ultimate source of protection. He's the ultimate source of provision. And so how does that change that dynamic of just how much you're trying to press into that situation? I think really when we understand that God is our protector, God is a defender, it makes it much easier for us to think about peace. Because maybe once we've expressed that opinion, once we've pressed our rights, we don't have to be so passionate about our needs being met, because our needs are being met by God. And that's kind of, where we were a couple of weeks ago on Sunday morning. It's such an important thing, to recognize in terms of how stabilized we are by the reality that God has got our back, that God is the reference point for our opinions, He's a reference point for truth, He's a reference point for plan, for what He has, established in terms of our lives, and what He's foreseen in terms of, where we are and what we'll need, and so on and so forth. I mean, naturally, the more that we're on the plan of God, the more confident we can be in terms of, again, God, being right where God wants us. And if we are right where God wants us, then we can be confident He's already foreseen what we're going through. And so again, He's going to be making the provisions that we need for our lives. He's going to be guiding us in the direction that's good. And so therefore, our ability to focus on other people and on this whole idea of peacemaking, and therefore not compromising relationship in the midst of an argument or a disagreement on things. See, to me, everything becomes secondary when we recognize God as the one that's defending and providing for us and protecting us. And that's the key in terms of just what we're promoting and what we're looking to do. And so when I understand who God is and what He provides, there is always a place for me to be settled within myself and with Him that is independent of what other people say or do. And that's kind of, again, the foundation of peacemaking. That kind of is a thing that takes the air out of the argument. Like, really, what is the priority? What are we really talking about? What really would happen if I just let this other person have their opinion, and do what they want? I know that there are matters in relationships that, there are great significant things. When you're dealing with parenting, you're dealing with, what are we going to be promoting in our kids' lives? When you're dealing about money, maybe talking about budgeting, you're talking about how we spend money, how much do we save, all those things, very important things, with dire consequences on the other side of it. And yet to think about how we would be peacemakers in the midst of that. One thing I encourage people to do, like particularly when you talk about husband and wife, when you talk about parenting, when you talk about children and parents, to the extent that you foresee what the issues are going to be, when you understand that, okay, we're going to be parenting, if you just had a baby, you're going to be parenting for 25 years. As I have adult children, I realize I'll probably be parenting my whole life. But anyways, or again, you're spending money, budgeting. What I encourage people to do is, rather than having conversations that are reactionary, because again, I think it's those reactionary conversations that very easily destroy peace. The best method in terms of peacemaking, when it comes to those big areas, when it becomes to these things, again, we're always going to have to be dealing with money. We're always going to have to be dealing with parenting. And so basically making sure you have those conversations in substantive ways, in pre-planned ways. Like, let's sit down and let's talk as husband and wife about where our children are, what stage are they in, what is our approach, what are we trying to get done, what are we trying to accomplish. Then now we're all the little decisions coming into that, and making sure we have each other's back. Making sure as our kids are trying to divide us, we choose, because of the conversations we have had, that we're not going to be divided. That again, we're going to have an environment of peace in our home, because we both are peacemakers. But we're making sure the conversations that we need to have, where those opinions are expressed, where what is godly is being pressed in, what God's ultimate opinion and God's authority, what He would have in the midst of that, even the authority that He's established in the home, and how that comes in terms of helping that peacemaking. But like I said, you're having a conversation that is before it's really necessary. Like, you're not talking about spending money right now. We're not in the store and saying, okay, are we going to purchase this? And that's where that reactionary stuff, or the kid does something wrong, and now all of a sudden we have a difference of opinion about how we're going to manage this. No, what I'm saying is have that conversation beforehand. Establish a budget. And then that budget is this thing that rules. Like, once we come to that place of agreement, in terms of a budget, that's been the power, between Karen and I. Again, here's the budget. Like, once we agree on the budget, that's the authority, if you will. We've both expressed our opinion. We've both had the conversation that we can have, and now there's that there. Okay, here's what we're trying to do with our kids. This is what we're trying to promote. Okay, here are the rules. Here's the, I've always said, have the board where you've got the kids' responsibilities. You've got the expectation of behavior. You've got the consequences mapped out. But the point I'm making in terms of this peacemaking is it's far better to have those conversations in a peaceful environment, in something that, something, if we don't agree on a budget in a day, it's not a big deal. Because, okay, we had a disagreement. Let me go to God in this. Let me pray about this. Let's both of us pray about this. Let's consult the Word of God. Let's think about, the ultimate consequences, the ultimate direction, if you take a week, a month, 2 weeks to decide on your parenting strategy, to decide how we're going to deal with now teenagers, or the 8-year-old, or the 2-year-old, or whatever, or again, how we're going to establish but you take a month to do that? How, how does that, do you see how if we just establish a standard in the context of that, and how the possibility for peace is far greater than we're in the midst of a situation and we get reactionary. And now all of a sudden, we're calling each other names or whatever. All these things that compromise peace. And, I didn't imagine that I would necessarily go here today, but I think it's such an essential thing. Again, when you think about peacemaking, when you think about, again, we're to be agents of reconciliation. We're supposed to be promoting peace in every relationship, in every context. We saw last week, it's even, bringing people to reconcile relationship with God. That's part of our peacemaking. We're ambassadors of Christ, and we're ministers of reconciliation. Well, that also happens amongst people, but sometimes to the extent that you can, because I think in some ways, sometimes the most problematic places of peace are with people that we're closest to. Maybe it's at work, maybe it's with the coworker, and I would even say the same thing. Boy, if I always have this conflict with this coworker, let's forget about, having the conversation in the midst of the issue, and let's sit down and say, okay, what's the goals of the company? What are the priorities that we're talking about? What bias am I bringing into the situation? What bias are you bringing into the situation? What authority is there in work that we can rely on to resolve this conflict? And I think it's sometimes the strategy of conversation that helps with the peacemaking. And so I think that's what we have for today is how are you fostering peacemaking and how you're structuring conversation, and just avoiding those situations where we become reactionary because boom, you're right here right now, we have to decide this right now. Well, that's a tough place. Where two people have heightened opinions, and it's a real important matter, and we have to resolve this now. That's a tough place to promote peace. But hey, we're going to grab a coffee. We're going to think about, again, what project are we working on? What are we trying to accomplish? What is your general opinion in terms of this? What is my general, why are we in this sticking place all the time about this thing? Well, let's talk. And, naturally, when you're talking about ungodly people, you're talking about people in the workplace, that's a great challenge. That's where a lot of times I think it is. Hey, boss, we always have conflict when we talk about this thing, or we're working on this project together and we're having these problems. Boss, I just want to let you know that we're going to have this conversation. We're going to try and resolve this. But, what is your opinion? What would you want us to get to? What place would you want to get to? See, to me, that's the peacemaking. See, you're working towards it. You're structuring it away where, you do that where in the context of that conversation, boy, let me apologize for this that I did. Let me just know that I forgive you for this or that over there. You go to your boss and let them know you're having this conversation, that his or her authority matters in this situation. And you're doing that to promote peace. Again, that's how you're a peacemaker. You're not a peacemaker because, so everything's fine and everything's good and we all like each other. That's not peacemaking. Peacemaking is when there are problems, but then you're strategizing, you're thinking, you're promoting the principles of Christ, the power of God, the provision of God. You're not like, well, everyone has to follow the Bible and you got to. You do that. You make sure you're living the highest standard of what a believer would be, but then you're trying to encourage people along that mode, and that's when you'll be a peacemaker. Well, that's all the time we have for today. But we'll then next time talk about the program of peacemaking. Like there are certain ways of, like, the Bible is aware of, general practices about how we engage in conflict, and that's what we'll get to on Thursday. So thanks for joining me today. Hope this is helpful to you. God bless.